What's going on, guys? Dare here with Fantasy Football Advice, coming at you with another fantasy football video. And in today's video, we are going to be going over the top rookie targets and the worst rookie targets. Initially, when we were going to be making this video, it was just going to be the top rookie targets, but we figured we had an opportunity to go through all of the fantasy relevant rookies and let you guys know what we thought about them and if we thought they were good targets or not based on their current ADP. It took a little bit more time, but we really think you guys are going to enjoy this one. So we'll jump right into it, but before I do, don't forget about the giveaway. We're going to be giving away a signed 8x10 Martavis Bryant photograph. This thing is sick. All you have to do to enter is make sure you're subscribed to the channel. If you're not, subscribe right now. And then just follow me and Nick on Twitter. The information for that is on the video screen right now and in the info in the description box below. So subscribe, follow us on Twitter, and you'll be automatically entered. We're going to be drawing the winner July 2nd. Now, without further ado, let's get into the video. I figured we should start with the wide receivers. I feel like if we just talk about the running backs, then by the time the wide receivers come, you guys are just going to click off the video. So we're going to start with wide receivers, and we know there aren't that many. So don't worry, we'll get to those valuable running backs soon. So the order in which I'm going to be presenting these is going to be based on their ADP. But don't forget, first I'm going through the wide receivers, and then I'm going through the running backs. So you're not going to have a mix of both. So if you're only interested in the receivers, you can start here, or if you want to just skip to the running backs, feel free to do so. Now, Calvin Ridley and DJ Moore, they go back to back in round 10. I'm going to start with Moore, even though he's being taken a spot behind him. So DJ Moore was drafted by the Carolina Panthers. He's currently a 10th round pick. And out of all the rookie wide receivers, Moore is probably going to be one of the most talked about during the offseason. We're not quite buying into him as an instant producer, at least not as much as other people are, and it's for a couple different reasons. First, we strongly believe in Devin Funchess performing this season. He did enough last season to continue to build off of his role. And while Moore is clearly the future and the direction that they want to be heading in, the upside in redraft leagues is not there for Moore. It's Cam Newton leading this offense. This passing offense just simply isn't going to be able to support Devin Funchess, Greg Olsen, Christian McCaffrey, and still have enough volume for anyone else to be fantasy relevant, or at least consistent on a week-to-week basis. So that's where the second part comes in. We're not saying that he's not going to have his games. It's more that his upside is just legitimately capped. Next year could be a different story, but for this year, we don't see him being much more than third in targets at best in this low passing offense. So it's a pass from us. He's not a target, and he likely won't be on any of our teams. And moving on, we have Calvin Ridley of the Atlanta Falcons. Like I said, they're going back to back. He's also a 10th round pick. Now, Ridley is similar to Moore, but he does have a little bit more upside. There is a legitimate path for him to gain more of a target market share in his offense, at least compared to DJ Moore. His only real competition for targets is Mohamed Sanu. Obviously, Julio Jones is going to be the main target leader, but they don't have a tight end like Greg Olsen. And while they do have capable receiving backs, Christian McCaffrey is going to be heavily targeted. And then you have to factor that their offense as a whole is more pass friendly than the Panthers. So these are the types of things that you would be looking for when making your draft day decisions. Regardless, as much as I'm saying Ridley's the better pick, I still think that he's more of a dynasty pick than a redraft pick. In the later rounds, we want players with a realistic path to becoming a top 20 player at the position. And while talent-wise, he has the potential in the future, the opportunity in the situation that he comes in is just not there. There is a world where Julio Jones gets injured, and Julio Jones, as we know, has dealt with his fair share of injuries in the past, and an injury would give Ridley an immediate increase in his target share. But as you know, we don't head into the draft expecting injuries, so we can't just draft Ridley with the hope that Julio gets injured. Running backs have handcuffs, so to speak. Wide receivers don't. It just never works out the same. Coming up next, we have Christian Kirk out of Arizona. He is coming in at a 14th round pick. And as we all know in the news, Kirk had a little hiccup earlier in the offseason where he was arrested for disorderly conduct and for supposedly causing property damage while allegedly on cocaine. Allegedly. Now, those charges have since been dropped, and as far as we know, that's the end of it. The NFL always has their own choice if they want to suspend a player, but from the sounds of it, I don't think that it's going to be going there. So you draft him as if that never happened. It's just worth mentioning if it does come up later down the road. As for him on the football field, he likely has the easiest path to getting a good market share of the targets in that offense. He is the number 2 receiver behind only Larry Fitzgerald. The only other capable receivers on that roster are Bryce Butler and JJ Nelson. As we all know, JJ Nelson is a role player, deep threat, speed guy, small guy. And Bryce Butler has been in the league for 5 years and has a career high of 317 receiving yards. If he scares you, then you're going to be afraid of every receiver in every depth chart. The reports coming out so far is that Christian Kirk looks good. The Cards are going to look to get their second round pick involved as much as possible earlier on, and there's no doubt that they targeted Kirk for a reason. Now, what's good about Kirk is that his skill set actually matches up well with the strengths of the quarterbacks on the roster. He's basically a slot receiver, so it's going to be interesting when you figure how it's going to work out between Larry Fitzgerald and Christian Kirk, because Fitzgerald played in the slot on 62% of his snaps. So it's possible that they do plan on having somewhat of a rotation, but that's all still to be determined. I think we could see a lot more production from him, especially in PPR, if he does retain that slot role. But he's just a really versatile player overall. And what makes him even better of a wild card is that he can also return kickoffs and punts. He did it for his team in college. They already have players that are doing that right now. I know Pat Peterson has been returning punts, but we know the doors are always revolving in those special teams positions, so don't be surprised if you see him out on the field on special teams downs. This could be the type of opportunity that we see given to him at some point, even if he doesn't start off there. And while it's not really a huge factor, we have seen it impact players like Tyreek Hill in his rookie season, to where just a few touchdowns really makes a difference on your overall season. Tyreek Hill is obviously a next level athlete, so we can't compare him to Christian Kirk at all. But could it be possible if he returns the kickoffs and the punts for this team for him to get 1, maybe 2? Yeah, it's completely possible. Overall, we think Kirk is actually a decent target. He's going in the 14th round. That's right before your kicker in your defense, so a late round flyer on a guy who you're not going to be afraid to drop. That's a yes from us. The next receiver we have, I wanted to include even though he's going undrafted, that's Dante Pettis of the San Francisco 49ers. On paper, Pettis may not seem like the type of receiver that we would be suggesting that you guys target. He's lacking the athletic profile. He didn't receive a ton of volume in college. 6 of his 7 touchdowns came from just 2 teams. But the fact is, the 49ers moved up to get him. Not only that, he's also quite versatile, giving the 49ers flexibility in the way that they want to use him. He has a decent frame for the NFL level. Hopefully he can put on a little bit more weight because he's still on the smaller side for his height. But regardless, one could make the case that he literally comes into the best position out of all rookie receivers. Even that over Christian Kirk. Because what's the difference? The 49ers offense should actually be good. As much as we like Larry Fitzgerald and David Johnson, especially in the receiving game, nobody has high expectations for that Cardinals offense. The 49ers have Jimmy G, a strong developing quarterback. And what do they also have? No receivers. They do have some. They have Pierre Garçon and Marquise Goodwin. And while they both have their distinct role, none of them have really done enough to show us that they're secure in their target market share. If Pettis comes in and he's really proving himself, which he will get the opportunity to do so, he could earn his way into being one of the top targets in this offense. And what's going to help him with that ability to do that? It's his versatility. They can line him up anywhere. Pierre Garçon goes down again, he can go in the slot. If Marquise Goodwin goes down, he can play on the outside. More than likely, he's going to be on the field with those receivers at the same time. But ultimately, it gives the team a little bit more wiggle room when it comes to their wide receiver packages. More versatility equals more snaps on the field equals more potential targets. So overall, Pettis does make for a good late round target and should be considered in all deeper leagues. So those 14, those 16 team leagues, make sure he's on your board. He's probably going later than some other guys who just shouldn't be drafted, like Jermaine Kearse. So those are the only receivers of note. We still have Anthony Miller of the Chicago Bears, James Washington of the Pittsburgh Steelers, and Tre'Quan Smith of the New Orleans Saints. Now, all these guys are also going undrafted, but we aren't really going to be mentioning them because we don't really have faith that they are going to be fantasy relevant. There's a chance that they may fight their way to fantasy relevance throughout the season, but at this point in the offseason, they're buried on their depth charts. So these players are probably going to be more of waiver wire type players rather than ones that you're going to have to need to know on draft day. These are the kind of wait and see players, the if an injury happens players, those kind of things. Maybe even preseason we might change our minds depending on how things shake out. But at this point, Anthony Miller, James Washington, and Tre'Quan Smith should not be on your draft boards in standard 12-team leagues. Okay, so that's going to do it for the wide receivers, guys. But I think it's time for the stat of the day. The winner of yesterday's stat of the day is Michael Enriquez. Congratulations, Michael Enriquez. You nailed it with this one. The question was the quarterback with the most batted balls in 2017. That's Matt Stafford. So good job with that. Matthew Stafford led the league. Very surprising. I don't want to say very surprising because he throws just a ton of passes. So more passes, more batted balls. But good job, Michael. Today's question is going to be a little harder, and we're actually going to be giving out not 1 point, but 2 points for this one. And since we're talking about rookie wide receivers, we're going to tie that in. And in 2014, Odell Beckham took the world by storm as a rookie wide receiver. He posted the best rookie wide receiver rating that we have seen in recent years. But surprisingly, that season, per Pro Football Focus, there were 2 receivers that were rated higher than him in wide receiver rating. If you can name both of them, but if you want to just go and name one of them, we'll give you a point. So first person to get each name wins. So I'll just repeat the question one more time. In 2014, Odell Beckham had an insane rookie wide receiver rating, but there were 2 non-rookies that beat him in wide receiver rating that year. Who were those 2 players? If you guys want to know where we're getting these stats, it's at Pro Football Focus. We use them for almost all of our research. If you guys are interested in doing this type of research for yourself or getting into the fantasy football industry, definitely sign up for Pro Football Focus. We have some discounts. Make sure you use our links in the description box below. Good luck to this question of the day. I think this one's going to be a hard one, and I'll probably be surprised if you guys get it, at least right away. The show must go on, though, and we're moving over to running backs, the ones you guys are most interested in. And I know the top running back everybody talks about is Saquon Barkley of the New York Giants. He's a first-round pick, and don't hate me for it, but I'm basically going to skip over him. He's a stud. He's our RB5. He's better in PPR, but still a good player to draft at the back of the first round in standard. Really, we've just talked so much about him so far this offseason that I feel like the value is going to be more into these other rookie running backs. With Barkley, you basically know what you're going to get. We have a whole video dedicated on him. If you guys want that information, go check out that video. It's a great source. But for right now, we're going to move on to some other guys in the draft. So based off current ADP, Rashad Penny comes in as the second RB off the board. For the Seattle Seahawks, he's coming in the 3rd round. So Christine Michael, Eddie Lacy, Thomas Rawls. This team has been trying to figure out this running back situation since Beast Mode left, and they found absolutely 0 success. So their answer was to draft Penny. They paid up to get him and surprised everybody, and hardly any analysts had Penny as their second RB off the board. So they really saw something in this kid. Now, because of the draft price that the Seahawks paid, he's going to have a long leash, a longer leash than those free agents that they brought in. That long leash comes with heavy usage. The Seahawks have always opted to give a large workload to one back. And as for an athlete, he's good and he's quick. He clocked in at a 4.46 at the combine. What does that mean? He has the speed to break away these big runs. Now that's the good, so what's the bad? Well, this offensive line is terrible. The defense is also bad. So they could literally get in shootouts, rendering Penny's 4th quarter touches to a relatively low amount. On the plus side, Penny can catch, but then you also have to factor in they have CJ Prosise. Now, Prosise hasn't been able to stay healthy so far, but it's no question that he is a superior pass catcher. We're not saying Prosise is going to be fantasy relevant, don't get us wrong, but they will certainly give him some passing, and I wouldn't be surprised to see him in there during 2-minute drills. So based on volume, he's going to be on the safer side of these rookie running backs, but he very well could be the Joe Mixon of the 2018 season. And I'm talking from a production standpoint. Mixon averaged about 3.6 yards per carry. Now, I'm not predicting Penny's going to average 3.6 yards per carry, but it has to be a realistic thought in your head when drafting him. And then again, as long as he has the volume, 3.6 yards per carry isn't going to be the end of the world for an RB2, and that's exactly where you're drafting him. Penny's a good target. We'll have him on some of our teams. You guys should definitely consider him too. The next player on this list coming in the 4th round is Derrius Guice of the Washington Redskins. And this ADP baffles me. I'm very surprised that Derrius Guice is going ahead some of these other guys behind him, because Guice is only going to be the 1st and 2nd down bruiser on this team. That has to make you a little bit scared in these PPR leagues, but he's a big guy. His most comparable players are Marshawn Lynch and Ezekiel Elliott. 2 guys you would be thrilled if you had anything similar in production to. So based on these comps, you probably would think he's a home run pick. Well, not so fast, because you have Chris Thompson taking most of the 3rd down work. So his ceiling for his type of production is probably going to more closely resemble Jordan Howard's than anything of like Ezekiel Elliott. And while we would obviously all be completely thrilled with Jordan Howard type production in the 4th round, but obviously the risk you run is that it's not a sure thing. One thing he does have going in his favor though is Alex Smith. As much as we all love Cousins as a fantasy quarterback, he did hurt the defense at time with his erratic play style. Alex Smith, on the other hand, has been known to limit his turnovers and has the ability to just keep the offense on the field. That could bode well for an early down back. But regardless, in PPR, he simply doesn't have the ceiling to warrant a high 4th round pick. He's going at the 404. So literally pick 40 overall. In standard, that would be somewhat of a reasonable price, but overall, we just like other RBs in this range more than him. And I can't say that he's going to be on our must target list. Coming in next, we have Sony Michel from the New England Patriots, who is also in the 4th round. And I'll say it now, the New England Patriots taking a running back in the 1st round was really surprising. I think it surprised a lot of people. As for the type of player that Michel is and the type of player that the Patriots got, I would say he's definitely one of the people that looks much better on film than what some of the measurables would portray. And I think that fits right into the New England Patriot thought process. For some reason, they have a way of scouting these players, overvaluing them, but then based off the value they provide to the team, they make for excellent picks. So I have a lot of faith in Sony Michel as a talent. And while I said his measurables aren't off the charts, he's still a very gifted athlete. And like some of these other rushers in this class, Michel is a true home run hitter. Not only that, he's great in pass protection, and at this stage of Brady's career, that's exactly what he needs. So you know Michel is going to see the field a lot. At the same time, nobody expects Michel to get a full workload, but that just simply hasn't been part of the Patriots' game plan for quite some time now. But it is somewhat of a risk you're going to assume. All of the backs they have on their roster are capable pass catchers, so you're basically banking on Sony Michel's versatility. It's a pretty safe bet, and the draft price that the Patriots paid for him guarantees him an opportunity to prove himself. And we do think that if everything falls his way, his ceiling could be something like a 2018 version of last year's Kamara, which is just absolutely insane. Now keep in mind, we did say ceiling, and that means he really has to make the most of his opportunities. We're not saying he's going to average 7 yards per carry, and if things don't translate on the field, Bill Belichick won't be afraid to reduce his snap count regardless of how high they took him in the draft. So overall, Sony Michel has a relatively safe floor in PPR leagues. He also has a combination of a high ceiling, but he is definitely on the riskier side. So we can't suggest that you make sure he's on every one of your fantasy rosters, but taking a shot on him could really pay off in some. The next and final running back in the 4th round we have is Ronald Jones of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. I'll come out and say it, we are not as excited about Jones as some of the other analysts are. We frankly just like some of the other rookie running backs based off value more in this class, but you've heard us say it multiple times, we do think that he is landing in a good offense. A good offense doesn't always lead to consistent fantasy points. His pass catching opportunities are going to limit him in PPR. This clearly makes him a better pick in standard leagues, and while he isn't going to be on any of our mid-round targets lists, we can't say that we do understand the pick. Before I go any further with Jones, I do want to make sure you guys are aware of just how young Jones is. To put it into perspective, he hasn't even turned 21 yet and has the 4th youngest breakout age on playerprofiler.com. Not 4th youngest in this rookie class, but 4th youngest of all time. So in those dynasty leagues, he's a really intriguing target because not only his age, but of all of the talented players in Tampa Bay, they're all very young, so it appears that they have set up the foundation for this offense for the next 4 to 5 years. So in dynasty leagues, you definitely need to move him up your rankings. Now, we aren't talking about dynasty though. This is redraft. And the fact of the matter is, there's going to be some risks with Jones. Is there a chance that he could be an immediate producer? Yes, but there's no denying he has an uphill battle this season, more so than that of some of the other rookies in this class. To start, this depth chart's loaded with players that may not have the name value, but they do have the ability to outproduce him from the start. Maybe not in actual efficiency, let's be honest, Jacquizz Rodgers and Peyton Barber, they kind of suck on the ground, but in overall performance categories that don't directly translate to stats, things like pass blocking and short yardage, those are all things that could ultimately limit his snaps. For running back targets, snaps is all you can count on. If you see some red flags that tell you he might be losing snaps, you might want to move him down in your rankings. Charles Sims is miles ahead of him as a pass catcher. Peyton Barber has 10 pounds on him, so while Jones is a completely capable back coming into a good team and a good offense, there are a lot of moving parts that tell you this isn't a slam dunk pick. Undeniably though, he does have a path to being a top 12 player, at least by mid-season, but since this backfield is going to start out as a committee, you may be disappointed with your immediate results based on the current draft price. For those reasons, we can't recommend him as a good target, but if you want to throw him in there, I do know that in this range, there's a lot of gray areas. There is no slam dunks in this range at the running back position, so if he's the only guy left and you're at a need for running back, don't be afraid to take him. This pick could pay off. Moving on, we have Royce Freeman. We've now entered the 5th round, and he was drafted by the Denver Broncos. Now, there's not all that much analysis that needs to go into Freeman. He's a big-bodied rusher who isn't afraid to shrug off defenders, but he's also lacking in a few areas that you would want. Things like breakaway speed, finesse, but that's okay, because in return, you get a guy that can wear down a defense. And on a competitive team, that can be really valuable. For you dynasty owners out there, just be aware that Freeman has had 1,026 touches during his college career, which is a ton. For reference, that's more carries in college than Booker has had in both college and the NFL combined, and he's been in the league for 2 years. We saw what happened with Freeman because of it. His play style sort of changed throughout time. It sort of transitioned. He went from really being a mover and a shaker to a guy who really was just trying to pump out the yards north and south. And you can contribute a lot of that to the wear and tear that he got from the amount of carries he had. So while most running backs would be in their prime at 26, his prime may come a little sooner, or maybe I should say that his decline will come a little bit sooner. Regardless, most of you watching this video are only in it for the redraft leagues. And what does Freeman come with? Well, he comes with a great skill set that can easily translate to the NFL level. On top of that, he has absolutely no competition on the depth chart. Devontae Booker has a career average of 3.6 yards per carry. And while Freeman's certainly a decent pass catcher, he is not definitively an upgrade over Freeman in the receiving game. Then you want to talk about Freeman's frame? Dude's 6 foot 230. Just due to his size alone, you can guarantee that he gets his first opportunity in the red zone. It's going to be his job to lose. Now, for all of you out there is going to be a lot of talk right now about Devontae Booker. Broncos have already came out. Booker is in for a significant workload. It's still a possibility. If Booker really shows up and is a different player than we've seen the past 2 years, then yes, he could gain that workload, especially if Freeman underperforms. But at this point, Booker has shown us absolutely nothing to worry about, and the best back always wins out in the end. We'd put our money 10 out of 10 times on Freeman to do that. Moving on to the 7th round, we have Kerryon Johnson from the Detroit Lions, and straight up, I'll say it right now, the 7th round is just too high. We understand that the Lions traded up for him, but they have so many players on the roster, especially at the running back position. This was the same draft price you paid last year for Amir Abdullah, and his only competition was Theo Riddick and Dwayne Washington, and we knew heading into the season that he was going to lead in carries. This year, not only do they have Riddick and Washington and Abdullah, they also signed LeGarrette Blount. Now, clearly some of those guys will be cut as we get closer to the season, but I think it's almost safe to say that Blount and Riddick are locks to be on the roster, and those are his biggest competition for touches. Riddick for more of the third down work, which isn't going to change because no matter what, Johnson really wasn't drafted to play that role. Riddick's always had success in that role in this offense, and Blount will likely get the red zone touches. So you're saying Kerryon Johnson won't have the passing upside. He won't be featured in the goal line. Not only that, but the Lions also haven't had a fantasy relevant back in years. Clearly, that's not enough upside for a 7th round pick, at least not for us. If we're talking double digit rounds, that's a different story. It could be considered a lottery pick. But one thing's for sure, don't sacrifice a bona fide starter for this pick in the 7th round. Moving on, we have Nick Chubb of the Cleveland Browns. He's currently coming in at the 9th round, and there's a lot of similarities between this pick and Kerryon Johnson. There are a lot of mouths to feed on this offense and not a lot of opportunities. You have Duke Johnson and Carlos Hyde, and while he would be next in line for receiving duties behind Duke Johnson, a Duke Johnson injury is needed in order for him to even be a weekly starter in PPR leagues. 2 injuries are needed for him to be actually considered a stud. Strictly based off of the Cleveland Browns draft price for him, he was a high 2nd round pick. He is going to see the field, but the touchdown expectancy is low, and barring injuries, the reception totals are expected to be low, so his ceiling isn't high. The difference between him and some of these other rookies that don't have a high ceiling is you don't have to pay as hefty of a draft price to snag him. But overall, Chubb is not a guy that we're going to be targeting. But if we were to have any Cleveland Brown on our roster, at least from the running back position, Nick Chubb would probably be it. But to be honest, he would have to fall in our lap. The next and final running back worth touching on is Nyheim Hines of the Indianapolis Colts. He's coming in the 13th round, and we think this is actually a good spot. He has great speed and is a great pass catcher, which is definitely the type of back that's needed for the Colts if this offense is led by Andrew Luck. Now, unfortunately, it looks like Mac is the leader right now in this backfield, but that does not mean that it's going to stay that way. How many times do we have a late round running back who's buried on the depth chart emerge at some point in the season? Nyheim Hines is the type of player that could make this transition. Now, in the 13th round, you really can't go wrong. So if you're like me and you like to load up on bench RBs at the tail end of the draft, target Hines. His opportunity may be limited, but the low investment could really pay off for you. He's certainly a good lottery pick, and we will be having shares of him on our rosters. There are 4 running backs worth mentioning. I'm not going to be breaking them down. You have Chase Edmonds of the Arizona Cardinals, Kalen Ballage of the Miami Dolphins, Jordan Wilkins of the Indianapolis Colts, and Justin Jackson of the Los Angeles Chargers. These players, they're not going to be fantasy relevant in redraft, at least not heading into your draft. They fall more into the handcuff category. Things could change in preseason. We could have injuries. They could come out and bust a 90-yard rush. But based on their chances of seeing the field today, they aren't going to be guys that are on your radar in standard 12-team leagues. If we did have to rank them, though, we would rank them in this order: Edmonds for the Cards, Ballage for the Dolphins, Wilkins for the Colts, and then Jackson coming in last. Each needs an injury in order to be relevant, but this isn't the NFL. Running backs get injured all the time. All right, everybody, that's going to do it for today's video. Don't forget to subscribe and enter yourself into the giveaway. If you like this video, hit that thumbs up button. We really hope you enjoyed this one. We thank you all for watching, and we'll catch you on the next one.